the first Tuesday of every month. That was our designated family dinner, a tradition I had started, hoping it would act as a sturdy bridge over the widening gap between my world and the one my son Mark now inhabited with his wife Jessica. Tonight felt different, though. A humid, late August air hung heavy over Columbus, Ohio, the kind of air that promises a storm. As I got ready, I felt a similar storm brewing in the pit of my stomach. I chose a simple navy blue dress, one of the few fancy things I owned. It had been a gift from my late husband, Tom, for our 35th anniversary. He'd always said blue brought out the calm in my eyes. I needed all the calm I could get tonight. The dinner was at the Gilded Spire, a restaurant Jessica had chosen. The name alone sounded expensive. It was downtown, in a part of the city that was all sleek glass and steel, a world away from my quiet, tree-lined street in Clintonville. My home was modest, a brick bungalow Tom and I had bought 40 years ago. Every corner held a memory, every scuff on the hardwood floor told a story. The house my son and Jessica lived in was different. It was a brand new two-story colonial in a Dublin suburb with a sprawling lawn and a two-car garage. It was a beautiful house. It was also my house. Tom and I had bought it as an investment 10 years ago, a nest egg for our retirement and a safety net for Mark. When he and Jessica got married, letting them live there rent-free seemed like the perfect wedding gift, a way to give them the solid start we never had. Use it to save up, I'd told them. Build your future. Driving downtown, I clutched the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My relationship with Jessica had always been polite, a carefully constructed facade of pleasantries that never quite reached our eyes. She was a woman who measured worth in brand names and zip codes. I measured it in calloused hands and kept promises. She worked in marketing for a high-end fashion retailer, a job that seemed to involve having strong opinions on 50 different shades of beige. I had been a hospital administrator for 30 years, a job that involved life or death decisions and holding the hands of grieving families. We were oil and water, but for Mark's sake, I tried. Lord, how I tried. The Gilded Spire was even more intimidating than its name. A valet, a boy who couldn't have been older than 19, opened my car door. Inside, the hostess led me past a towering wall of wine bottles to a circular booth where they were already seated. Mark stood up to hug me, his familiar embrace a small island of comfort in this sea of opulence. "Mum, you made it," he said, smiling, but his eyes darted nervously towards Jessica. "Of course, sweetie. Wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice warmer than I felt. Jessica offered a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Eleanor, that's a lovely dress." The slight pause before the word dress was a masterclass in passive aggression. It was her way of saying it was quaint, old-fashioned, not up to her standards. I simply smiled back. "Thank you, Jessica. It's my favorite." The dinner began with the usual dance. I'd ask about their work. Jessica would talk about a major campaign launch and use a dozen acronyms I didn't understand. I'd mention my volunteer work at the local library, and she'd get a vacant look in her eyes, as if I'd started speaking a dead language. Mark acted as the frantic translator, trying to find common ground where there was none. "Mum, you'd love the new self-checkout system at their main store. It's so efficient," he'd say, trying to connect my world to hers. I'd just nod along. The tension ratcheted up when the conversation turned to home improvements. "We're thinking of redoing the kitchen," Jessica announced, swirling a ridiculously large glass of red wine. "These countertops are just so builder-grade. I'm thinking Carrara marble." I felt a familiar prickle of irritation. The countertops were granite, and they were perfectly fine. Tom and I had picked them out ourselves. "That sounds expensive," I said, aiming for a neutral tone. Jessica laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't reach her eyes. "You have to spend money to create value, Eleanor. It's about building equity. The best way to build equity is to pay down the principal," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. It was the kind of practical advice my husband would have given. It was also, I realized a second too late, the worst possible thing I could have said. The air grew thick with unspoken things. Mark shifted uncomfortably, taking a sudden deep interest in his water glass. Jessica placed her wine glass down with a delicate click. Her eyes, a cold, pale green, narrowed. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft. I tried to backtrack. "Nothing, dear, just an old saying." "No," she pressed on, leaning forward. "I know what you're implying. You think we're frivolous, don't you? That we don't appreciate what we have." I didn't say that, I said, my own voice firming up. My calm was beginning to fray. You didn't have to, she shot back. She glanced around the opulent restaurant, then looked back at me, a sneer twisting her perfectly painted lips. You just don't get it, do you? You're so stuck in the past, with your little bungalow and your stories about how hard everything was back in the day. You come here in your 20-year-old dress, and you judge us. Mark finally spoke up, his voice weak. Jess, come on, that's not fair. But she ignored him. Her focus was entirely on me. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper, meant for the whole table to hear, but laced with a personal poison intended only for me. You know what I think, Eleanor? I think you bring your dusty, old-fashioned ideas everywhere you go. It doesn't matter if we're at home or in a nice restaurant. You always find a way to bring down the mood with your constant reminders of scrimping and saving. She picked up her heavy, ornate silver fork, gesturing with it as if it were a weapon. We're trying to build a beautiful life, a life of quality, and you just don't fit. Your whole attitude, it's just so. She paused, searching for the perfect, most cutting word. She looked me up and down, from my sensible shoes to my greying hair, and then her eyes lit up with a cruel sort of glee. It's trash. The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Trash. Time seemed to slow down. I saw Mark's face, pale with shock and shame. I saw the flicker of triumph in Jessica's eyes. She had finally said it, the thing she'd been telegraphing for years with her sighs and her thinly veiled insults. In her world of marble countertops and designer clothes, I was disposable. I was garbage. Me, the woman who had worked double shifts to pay for Mark's college education. Me, the woman who had signed the deed on the very house she was so proud of. The insult wasn't just about my dress or my stories. It was a judgment on my entire life, on the memory of my husband, on the very foundation of hard work and sacrifice that allowed her to sit here, in this ridiculous restaurant, holding that silver fork. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. The hurt was there, a deep, searing pain in my chest. But beneath it, something else was crystallizing. Resolve. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't cause a scene. I carefully placed my own fork and knife on my plate, folded my napkin, and placed it on the table. Excuse me, I said, my voice eerily steady. I don't feel well. I stood up, my back ramrod straight. Mark started to get up, stammering. Mum, wait. I held up a hand, stopping him. I looked directly at Jessica, whose smug expression was just beginning to falter, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. I held her gaze for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. Then I turned and walked away. I walked out of the restaurant, past the wine wall and the young valet, and into the humid Ohio night. The storm hadn't broken yet, but I could feel the electricity in the air. As I drove home, the tears finally came, hot and angry. But they weren't just tears of pain. They were tears of fury. She had called me trash. She had no idea the kind of storm she had just unleashed. The silence in my bungalow was deafening when I got home. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of laughter, of arguments, of Tom's booming voice calling my name from the other room. I walked through the house, my hand trailing along the worn armchair where he used to sit, the faint scent of his pipe tobacco still clinging to the fabric after all these years. Trash. The word echoed in the quiet rooms, each syllable a fresh stab of pain. It wasn't just a word. It was the complete and utter dismissal of a life. Our life. I couldn't sleep. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, my hands trembling slightly as I held the warm mug. I sat at my small kitchen table, the one Tom had built by hand, and stared out at the dark backyard. My mind replayed the scene at the restaurant over and over. Jessica's sneer. Mark's shocked paralysis. My son, my wonderful, kind son, had sat there and let her gut me with that word. He hadn't said a thing to defend me. That hurt almost as much as the insult itself. My gaze drifted to a framed photo on the wall. It was of me and Tom, taken the day we closed on the second house, the one in Dublin. We were standing in front of it, grinning like fools, holding a sold sign between us. Tom had his arm around me, squeezing my shoulder. I remember that day so clearly. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, and the air smelled of wood smoke and possibility. We did it, Ellie, he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. A whole house, paid for, not for us, but for the future. He wasn't a man of many words, my Tom, but when he spoke it mattered. He'd worked for 40 years at the same auto parts factory, his hands permanently stained with grease, his back aching. I'd balanced my hospital career with raising Mark, juggling schedules and budgets with a precision that would impress a military general. We never took fancy vacations. Our cars were always used. We poured every spare dollar, every bit of overtime into savings and investments. That house wasn't just sticks and bricks. It was a monument to our partnership, a physical manifestation of decades of sacrifice. "This house is built on honest work," Tom had said to me that day, his eyes serious as he handed me the keys. "It should always be a place of love and respect, not for showing off, for living, for family, a promise. It had been a promise between us. This house was meant to be a foundation of love and respect, and Jessica, with one hateful word, had desecrated that foundation. She had taken our gift, our sacrifice, and used it as a stage to perform her superiority, all while looking down on the very people who had built it. The sun started to rise, casting long shadows across my kitchen floor. The tea was cold in my hands. The hurt from the night before had cooled, too, solidifying into something hard and unyielding. It was righteous anger. Jessica hadn't just insulted me, she had insulted Tom's memory. She had insulted the very concept of hard work and decency. She was living in a house built by trash and had the audacity to call its creator the same. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about restoring balance. It was about honoring my husband's legacy. It was about teaching a lesson in respect that was long overdue. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called Carol. She had been my best friend since we were both young mothers, navigating parenthood together. She was a retired history teacher, sharp as a tack and with a healthy dose of outrage for any injustice. "Eleanor, I was just about to call you. How was dinner with the Queen of Sheba?" she asked, her voice crackling over the phone. I took a deep breath and told her everything. The restaurant, the dress comment, the talk of marble countertops, and finally the word, trash. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Carol's voice came back, low and dangerous. "She did not. She did, Carol, in front of Mark and everything. That little, oh, I can't even say the words," Carol sputtered, her fury a comforting balm on my own raw wound. "And what did Mark do?" "Nothing," I whispered. "He just sat there." "Coward," she snapped. "Eleanor, this is unacceptable. You cannot let this stand. She is living for free in a house you and Tom bled for, and she has the nerve to call you trash. Oh, this is not just an insult. This is a declaration of war." "It felt like it," I admitted. "So what are you going to do?" Carol asked, her tone shifting from outrage to strategy. "Are you going to have a talk with her? Because we both know that's like talking to a brick wall with expensive taste." "No," I said, my voice gaining strength. I stood up and walked into my small office, a converted spare bedroom. I opened the file cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "I'm not going to talk to her. I'm done with talking." Inside the folder was the deed to the Dublin house. My name, Eleanor Vance, was printed in clear black ink. Sole owner. The living arrangement with Mark and Jessica had been informal, a handshake agreement. They paid the utilities and property taxes, but there was no lease, no rent-to-own contract signed. It was all based on trust, a trust that had been shattered. "Carol," I said, my decision solidifying with every word. "She thinks I'm trash. I'm about to show her what this trash can do with a piece of paper and a lawyer." Carol let out a low whistle. "Ellie, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. "Tom said that house was for love and respect. There's none of that there now. It's just a stage for her vanity. I'm taking it back. I'm protecting our legacy." After hanging up with Carol, my next call was to Mr. Henderson. He had been our family lawyer for decades, a kind, methodical man who had handled Tom's will. I explained the situation to him, keeping my voice calm and factual, omitting the raw emotion, and focusing on the disrespect and the broken verbal agreement. "I see," he said, his voice calm and professional. "Eleanor, given that there is no formal lease agreement in place, they are essentially tenants at will. You have every legal right to reclaim your property. The process would involve serving them with a formal notice to quit. In Ohio, that requires a 30-day notice." 30 days, I repeated. It sounded so clinical, so final. "Yes, it's the proper legal way to do it. It gives them a reasonable amount of time to find other arrangements. I can have the paperwork drawn up this afternoon if you'd like to come by and sign it." "I'll be there at 3, I said without hesitation. As I hung up the phone, I looked at the photo of me and Tom again. I imagined his hand on my shoulder, his quiet, steady strength. This wasn't what we had envisioned for the house, but I knew, with every fibre of my being, that he would have approved of this. You don't reward disrespect. You don't let someone tarnish the things you built. You protect your legacy, and that's exactly what I was about to do. The storm was no longer brewing inside me. It was about to break over Dublin, Ohio. Walking into Mr. Henderson's office felt like crossing a threshold. The air inside was cool and smelled of old paper and leather-bound books, a stark contrast to the humid, emotionally charged world I'd been living in for the past 24 hours. Mr. Henderson greeted me with a sympathetic but professional smile. He was a man who dealt in facts and statutes, not family drama, and for that I was grateful. He turned my raw, messy pain into a clean, logical process. "Eleanor, please have a seat," he said, gesturing to a sturdy wooden chair opposite his large desk. "I have the documents ready." He slid a small stack of papers across the polished wood. On top was the notice to quit. The legal jargon was dense, but the message was brutally simple. It stated that the tenancy at will for the property at 45T2 Juniper Lane, Dublin, was terminated and that the occupants, Mark and Jessica Vance, were required to vacate the premises within 30 days of receiving the notice. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. For a fleeting moment, a wave of doubt washed over me. This was my son, my only child. Was I really about to make him and his wife homeless? But then the memory of Jessica's face, twisted with contempt, flashed in my mind. The word trash echoed in the quiet office. This wasn't about making them homeless. It was about drawing a line in the sand so deep that it could never be ignored. This was a consequence, a direct result of an action she had chosen to take. My signature wasn't an act of aggression. It was the final, unavoidable reaction. I signed my name, my script firm and clear. Eleanor Vance. "The owner. What happens now?" I asked, my voice a little hoarse. "I will arrange for a professional process server to deliver the notice," Mr. Henderson explained. "It's better that way. It's official, impartial, and there's a legal record of them receiving it. I expect they will receive it by tomorrow afternoon." Tomorrow. It was happening. There was no going back. I paid his fee, shook his hand, and walked out into the bright afternoon sun feeling strangely hollowed out, but also resolute. The deed was done. Now all I could do was wait for the fallout. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. Every time the phone rang, my heart leaped into my throat. I tried to distract myself by gardening, pulling weeds with a vengeance, but my mind was in Dublin, imagining the moment that envelope would arrive. I pictured the confusion on Mark's face, the indignation on Jessica's. The call came at 5:15 p.m. the next day. The caller ID flashed Mark. I let it ring 3 times, took a deep, steadying breath, and answered. "Hello, Mark." "Mum." His voice was a choked combination of disbelief and fury. "Mum, what is this? We just got a letter, some legal thing, an eviction notice. Is this a joke? This has to be some kind of horrible mistake." I sat down heavily in my armchair, Tom's chair. "It's no mistake, Mark. It's a notice to quit. A notice to— You're kicking us out. You're kicking your own son out of his house," he yelled, his voice cracking. "It is not your house, Mark," I said, my voice dangerously quiet and firm. "That is the lesson here. It is my house. It is the house your father and I bought with our life savings. But why? Out of nowhere. What did we do?" The question was so disingenuous, so willfully ignorant, that it reignited the cold fire in my belly. "What did you do?" I repeated, my voice dripping with ice. "Let's see. On Tuesday night, your wife looked me in the eye and called me trash. She called me trash while sitting in a restaurant I was paying for, while planning to spend thousands of my unrealized equity on marble countertops for a house she doesn't own. And you, Mark, you did nothing. You sat there and let her. You let her disrespect me, my life, and the memory of your father. So don't you dare ask me what did you do?" There was a stunned silence on his end. I could hear Jessica's frantic voice in the background. "What's she saying? Let me talk to her." Mark came back on, his tone shifting from anger to pleading. "Mum, look, she was stressed. She had a little too much to drink. She didn't mean it like that. You know how she gets." "Oh, I know exactly how she gets," I said. "I've been knowing how she gets for 5 years. I've been swallowing her little insults, ignoring her condescending tone, all for you. But there are some lines that once they are crossed, you can never go back. And that was one. She lives under a roof built by trash. Apparently that's not up to her standards anymore. So I am removing the problem." "This is insane," he shouted. "You're going to make us homeless over one stupid word." "It wasn't one stupid word, Mark. It was the tip of an iceberg of disrespect. And no, I'm not making you homeless. I'm giving you the legal 30 days notice to find a home that you can actually afford, one that doesn't come with the ghost of your trashy mother-in-law attached. I could hear Jessica grab the phone. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. Eleanor, you can't do this. This is our home. The accusation was so ludicrous it was almost laughable. Jealous? I had everything I needed. A paid-for home, a secure pension, and a clear conscience. They were the ones living a lie, propped up by my generosity. Jessica, I said, my voice dropping to a calm, lethal tone, the only person who is ruining your life is you. You had a beautiful, free place to live, a foundation to build a real future. All that was required in return was a little bit of common decency, a little respect. It was too high a price for you, it seems. You wanted the house, but you didn't want the person who provided it. Well, now you get neither. I'll sue you, she shrieked. Go ahead, I said calmly. My name is on the deed. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, whose number I'm sure you can find, will be happy to explain your complete lack of legal standing. You have 30 days. I suggest you spend less time yelling and more time looking at apartment listings. Goodbye. And with a final satisfying click, I ended the call. I turned off the ringer on my phone and sank back into the armchair. My heart was pounding and my body was trembling with adrenaline. It was awful. It was painful. But as I sat there in the quiet of my home, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived, I felt something else too. A profound sense of rightness. The paper had been unfolded, the message had been delivered, the consequences were now in motion, and they were no longer my burden to bear. The 30 days that followed were a study in silence, a heavy, suffocating silence from my son and his wife, and a peaceful, liberating silence in my own life. I didn't reach out, and they didn't try to contact me again after that first explosive phone call. The first week was the hardest. Every shadow seemed like Mark walking up my driveway. Every car that slowed on my street made my stomach clench. I was steeling myself for another confrontation, for pleading or for threats, but none came. Instead, I focused on my own life. I spent hours in my garden, coaxing late-season roses to bloom. I had coffee with Carol every other day, and she would pat my hand and tell me I was the strongest woman she knew. I reorganized Tom's workshop in the garage, a task I'd been putting off for years. As I sorted through his old tools, the smell of sawdust and oil filled the air, and I felt a sense of connection to his quiet strength. I was reclaiming my own space, not just my property in Dublin, but my emotional well-being. I was Eleanor Vance, not just Mark's mother or Jessica's mother-in-law. I was a person worthy of respect, and I was finally acting like it. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, with about a week to go before the deadline, there was a knock on my door. It was tentative, soft, not the angry pounding I had half expected. I opened it to find Mark standing on my porch, alone. He looked terrible. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. The expensive suit he wore for his sales job hung on him, and his usual confident posture had been replaced by a weary slump. He was drenched from the rain, having made no attempt to use an umbrella. "Mum," he said, his voice raspy. Can I come in?" I hesitated for only a second before stepping aside. He walked into my living room, dripping onto the welcome mat, looking around as if he were seeing it for the first time. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking on the second word. "I am so sorry." They were often followed by excuses for Jessica. "I should have said something at the restaurant," he continued, finally meeting my eyes. His were filled with a shame so profound it was painful to see. When she said that word, I just froze. It was wrong. It was cowardly. There's no excuse. I should have defended you. You're my mother. He sank onto the edge of my sofa, burying his face in his hands. This whole month has been a nightmare. I thought she would calm down, see reason, but she just got worse. It's all she talks about. How you've ruined us. How it's all your fault. I remained silent, letting him speak. This was his confession, his reckoning. He needed to get it all out. He looked up, his face a mask of misery. "The thing is, Mum, you didn't ruin us. We were already ruined. We were just pretending we weren't. And then it all came pouring out. The truth. Jessica's desire for a life of luxury wasn't just a preference. It was an addiction." He pulled a crumpled bank statement from his pocket. "She wanted the marble countertops," he said with a hollow laugh. "We couldn't even afford the granite ones if we'd had to pay for them. They were drowning in debt. 2 car payments that were far too high. Credit cards maxed out on designer clothes, expensive dinners, and weekends away that they plastered all over social media. They were living a life for an audience, and my free house was the stage that made the whole production possible. Without it, the set was collapsing. I tried to talk to her about it, Mark confessed, his voice barely a whisper, about budgeting, saving, but she'd just accused me of being cheap, of being like, well, of being like you, practical, careful. She hated it. I think she resented you for the house because it was a constant reminder that we couldn't do it on our own. She called you trash because she felt like a fraud. It wasn't an excuse, and he didn't offer it as one. It was just a sad, pathetic explanation. Her cruelty was born of her own deep-seated insecurity and shame. We have to be out by next Monday, he said, looking around my cozy, paid-for living room. We found an apartment. It's small. It's all we can afford. Jessica, she's calling it a shoebox. She hasn't started packing. I think she still believes you're going to change your mind. Here it was, the moment of truth. My son sat before me, broken and remorseful. Part of me, the motherly part, wanted to sweep in and fix it all, to say, it's okay, you can stay. But the woman who had been called trash, the widow who was honoring her husband's legacy, knew that would be the worst thing I could do. The lesson was not yet learned, not by Jessica. The consequences had to be real. I sat down in the armchair opposite him. I am not changing my mind about the house, Mark, I said, my voice gentle but firm. The lesson needs to stick, for both of you. You cannot build a life on a foundation of debt and disrespect. He flinched but nodded, accepting it. He had expected that. But, I continued, leaning forward, you are still my son, and I still love you. I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. You need to get out of this financial hole, and you need to do it together. I will help you with the security deposit and the first month's rent on the new apartment. He looked up, stunned. Mum, you don't have to do that. I know, this isn't me saving you. This is me investing in a chance for you to start over, properly this time. On two conditions. Anything, he said immediately. First, you and Jessica are going to see a financial counselor. Together. No more secrets. No more hiding the debt. You get real about your money. Second, I took a deep breath. She has to apologize. Not a text, not a message through you. She has to come here, look me in the eye, and apologize for what she said. 2 days later, they were both on my porch. Jessica looked even worse than Mark had. Her expensive clothes seemed out of place against her pale, tear-stained face. Her usual mask of haughty confidence was gone, replaced by a raw, humbled vulnerability. They came inside. Mark stood by the door as Jessica walked toward me, twisting her hands. Eleanor, she began, her voice small. You have been nothing but generous to us, and I threw it back in your face. Tears welled in her eyes. The truth is, I was jealous, not of your money, but of your contentment. You're so secure in who you are. I've been trying so hard to be someone I'm not, and I took it out on you. I was wrong. I am so deeply sorry. It was real. The artifice was gone. In that moment, I didn't see the woman who had sneered at me over a wine glass. I saw a young, insecure person who had made a terrible mistake, and was finally facing it. I gave a slow nod. I accept your apology, Jessica. The relief that washed over her face was palpable. The relationship wouldn't be magically healed overnight. The trust would take a long time to rebuild. But for the first time we had a foundation to build on, not one of obligation or pretense, but one of hard-won, painful truth. They moved out that weekend. I hired a company to clean the Dublin house from top to bottom, erasing the last traces of their life there. 2 months later I had new tenants, a nice young family whose rent payments went directly into my retirement fund. The bridge between my world and my son's was different now. It was longer, and we crossed it more cautiously. But it was stronger, built not with the flimsy materials of obligation, but with the solid steel of respect. I had lost the fantasy of a perfect family, but I had reclaimed something far more valuable, my dignity. And in doing so, I had given my son and his wife the chance to find their own,